50,000 years ago, Europe was not the world we know. It was a land of ice. Vast glaciers pressed down on the earth, carving mountains, grinding stone. The air was sharp, the forests were silent, and moving through this frozen land was a kind of human, not us. The Neanderthals, they were powerful, bodies built for the cold, shorter, stockier, with muscles hardened by generations of struggle. A Neanderthal hunter could bring down beasts twice his size. His arms were forged for strength, his chest broad as a shield. Yet strength was not all they carried. Their minds were vast, their brains even larger than our own. They shaped stone into blades, bone into tools. They built shelters from wood and hide, and in the deep shadows of caves, they left behind symbols, painted with earth and fire. Symbols that whisper of thought, of memory, of meaning. For more than 200,000 years, Neanderthals thrived in Europe's cold. They hunted mammoths. They gathered firewood beneath ancient pines. They cared for their wounded. They buried their dead. They were not beasts. They were human. But far to the south, another kind of human was rising, Homo sapiens. Our ancestors, taller, leaner, built for endurance, not brute force. They could run for miles beneath the African sun. They carried not just tools, but imagination. They carved figures from ivory. They painted animals on cave walls. They strung beads from shells, turning the world into symbols, into stories. And most importantly, they spoke. Not just commands, but language. Words that carried myths, memories, visions of tomorrow. Words that could bind a tribe together. Words that could outlast death. 60,000 years ago, sapiens began to move. Out of Africa, across the Middle East, into the frozen north. Step by step, fire by fire, they spread into the lands of the Neanderthals. And soon, two kinds of humans stood face to face. What passed between them? Did they stare in silence, wary and uncertain? Did they trade food, stone, fire? Or did they raise their weapons, driven by fear, by hunger, by the need to survive? Archaeology offers fragments. In caves, the tools of both species lie together, side by side, as if two worlds had briefly touched. Sometimes, Neanderthals vanished quickly where sapiens appeared. In other places, they lingered, together, for thousands of years. This was not just a meeting, it was a turning point, because though the Neanderthals would vanish, they would not be gone. Pieces of them remain, not in caves, not in stone, but in us. Their DNA runs in our blood, in our bodies, in the small hidden codes that shape who we are. But how? How could the strongest humans of Europe disappear? Why them and not us? The answers lie in the cold dawn of prehistory. A story of survival, of competition, of mystery. A story of the last Neanderthals. 45,000 years ago, Europe was still a frozen frontier. The land was raw, untouched, shaped by the slow hand of ice. Herds of mammoth carved paths through the plains, their tusks gleaming against the pale sun. In the forests, shadows moved. Heavy figures, broad and strong. The Neanderthals. This had been their home for hundreds of generations. Every mountain path, every hunting ground, every cave blackened by smoke bore their mark. For them, the land was not strange. It was memory. It was survival. But on the horizon, others were coming. Slender figures, taller, lighter. They carried the same fire, the same hunger. Yet they also carried something different. A way of thinking, of imagining, that Neanderthals had never faced before. Homo sapiens, not our ancestors. At first, the meetings were brief. Glimpses at a distance, a figure across the river, a shadow disappearing into the trees. Two kinds of humans circling each other, neither certain if the other was friend or rival. Archaeologists uncover fragments of these encounters, flint blades shaped by sapiens, lying beside the thicker scrapers of Neanderthals. Evidence of shared ground, shared time, perhaps even shared fires. Did they trade? A carcass of meat for a blade of stone. Did they teach each other? The long, thin spear points of sapiens, copied by Neanderthal hands. Or was it something deeper, a silent recognition that despite the differences, they were the same kind of creature? Not beasts, not prey, but human, there is proof of something more intimate, proof written in our blood. When Sapiens and Neanderthals met, they did more than share tools. They shared lives, they shared children, their lineages intertwined. Today, in almost every human outside of Africa, fragments of Neanderthal DNA remain. In our immune systems, in our skin, in the way our bodies endure the cold. They are not gone, they are inside us. But not every encounter was gentle. In a world where survival balanced on the edge of every hunt, strangers could mean danger. Imagine two hunting parties reaching the same herd of reindeer, the air tense, spears raised, one mistake and snow-stained red. Neanderthals lived in small bands, 20, maybe 30 at most. Sapiens gathered in larger groups, weaving networks across valleys, uniting not just families but tribes. Their strength was not only in muscle, but in the stories they told, the symbols they carved, the dreams they shared. And slowly, this difference began to matter. The world of the Neanderthals was changing. The cold grew harsher, food grew scarce. Where once they had walked alone across vast hunting grounds, now they found Sapiens' footsteps alongside their own. New ideas, new competition, new pressures. Yet for thousands of years they endured, not vanished, not yet defeated. But the balance was shifting, and with every passing generation, the question grew louder. Could two kinds of humans share the same world? 35,000 years ago, the Neanderthals were still here. They hunted, they endured, but their numbers were fewer now. The balance of the world was changing. The Ice Age deepened. Winters stretched longer, harsher. Summers grew short and cold. Herds wandered farther in search of food. Each hunt became more dangerous, each fire more precious. And into this fragile world came another pressure. Homo sapiens spread across Europe. Their camps rose in valleys. Their voices echoed across plains. They painted caves with animals, carved flutes from bone, told stories that bound them together. They lived not only by blood and muscle, but by vision. The Neanderthals did not vanish overnight. They lived beside Sapiens for thousands of years. At some sites, their tools remain long after Sapiens arrived, proof of survival, of resilience. At others, their traces end abruptly, as if erased. What ended their story? Perhaps disease carried unknowingly by Sapiens spread through small Neanderthal groups. With no immunity, they may have fallen quickly. Perhaps numbers. Neanderthals lived in scattered bands, 20, maybe 30. Sapiens gathered in larger tribes, connected across miles. When Neanderthals lost a few, they could not recover. And perhaps it was competition. The same herds, the same caves, the same rivers. When food ran short, it was not strength that decided survival, but numbers, unity, imagination. Slowly, Neanderthals dwindled, their fires dimmed, their voices fell silent. The valleys they once ruled grew empty, but not all was lost. From DNA we know this. They did not vanish completely. They became part of us. Their children lived among Sapiens tribes. Their genes survived the millennia, hidden in bloodlines that stretch to this very moment. Their strength remains in us, their endurance, even their struggles, whispers in our very bodies. And yet, one question lingers. If they were strong, intelligent, adaptable, why were they the ones who disappeared? The answer may not lie in their failure, but in something Sapiens carried, something invisible, imagination, the power to dream of things not yet real, to share visions, to weave myths, to unite hundreds under one idea. It was imagination that gave Sapiens the future, and in the silence left behind, the Neanderthals became memory. 30,000 years ago, the last Neanderthals walked the earth. They were few, scattered, their bands broken, their fires fading. Somewhere, perhaps in a hidden valley, a small family gathered around their final hearth. Mothers wrapped children in furs, hunters gripped worn spears. The land that had once been theirs now belonged to others, to us, and then the trail ends. There is no battlefield, no massacre. Archaeology reveals no single night of destruction. Instead, the Neanderthals slipped away quietly, generation by generation, until only traces remained. Bones buried in earth, tools abandoned in caves, handprints pressed against stone. But they were not erased, not entirely, for within us their shadow lingers. Almost every person outside Africa carries fragments of Neanderthal DNA, in hair and skin, in the strength of bone, in the defenses of our immune system. They live inside us still. When you look in the mirror, you carry them, a reminder they were never truly lost. And yet, their story is unfinished. Why did they fade while we endured? Was it the cold disease, conflict, or something more subtle, the relentless power of imagination? Perhaps they could not dream as we dream, could not bind tribes with shared myths, could not plan for futures beyond the horizon. In the end, it may not have been strength, but vision that decided which kind of human survived. The Neanderthals are gone, but not forgotten. Their strength lives in our bodies. Their memory lives in our DNA. Their story lives in us. When we speak of humanity, we speak not of one kind, but two. One that vanished, one that endured, bound together forever.